Hi everyone, welcome back to the workshop, and today going to play around with a quick little project that will allow me to have a couple of holiday decorations at work, as well as using up some of the stash of miscellaneous plywood I have accumulating on the spare material rack. And so I went ahead on Amazon, ordered up a string of these little, they call them fairy lights. They're just like a little 3-foot strand of micro LED lights. We're going to incorporate this into it, try to make a little desktop or shelf top Christmas tree that we can cut out on the laser that we'll be able to use different thicknesses of plywood fairly easily. And that's my goal, so that's easy to change for whatever material you might have. So if that sounds interesting to you, you want to check it out, stay tuned. We're going to jump right into it. So I've used these little lights before in some holiday lanterns that I cut out on the CNC, and what I did was just kind of drill a hole and try to push the LED through. But what I'm thinking I want to do on this one is kind of use them long ways. We're going to try to get the most out of it. Now these are kind of rectangular in shape, and I don't know if I can get this to show up very well, but they are, you know, they're longer than they are wider. And so what I want to do is I want to measure the width and also kind of its like diameter. They're roundish, and that will allow me to cut some slots into the back of the tree. I want to hide all the wire, and I want this little battery, which has a switch. I want this to be accessible but hidden. So we're going to be doing a little bit of a layered design, and got the idea while cutting out some other things. This is basically just a little Christmas tree cutout, and my thought is to just put little slits in different areas so that they kind of light up the tree, and then we can engrave on the front of this some decorations to dress up a little bit. Then we'll have the wire come down the bottom, and I'm going to put on the back of it where all the wiring is, I'll do a kind of a border layer with a spot in the middle to allow it to pass through, and then we'll duplicate this with just a solid tree on the back. That should close it all in, and then we'll have a little base that the battery compartment can sit in. So you'll just flip it upside down and turn it on or off. These little LED lights, I got them off Amazon. They were like $4 or $5 to a pack for about $6. So these things themselves are fairly cheap, and they're just powered off of a CR, what is it, your typical kind of a nickel battery here, the CR2032 batteries. So they're fairly cheap to operate. It takes 2 of them in there, and so they're cheap and easy to replace, and they're very thin. That was my thought. I thought about getting some USB powered ones, but this will allow it to be just completely standalone. So let's jump into Lightburn. I'll kind of show you what I've got going on, how we'll be able to adjust it for different sizes, and then we'll start cutting them out. Let's take a look in Lightburn at what I've drawn up here. So over on the right here is kind of the main piece. It is our Christmas tree outline. And what I went ahead to do is I've got the outline and then added a little bit of a slot here in the bottom that is going to stick into our base. And then for our LED lights, as you can see, I've got these little rectangular slits, and we can take a quick look at those. I measured those out for the LEDs themselves. They seem to be about a 1/4 inch long and just over a 1/16 inch kind of diameter in height. And so I'm hoping that by just pressing them in, that they'll stay in, they'll glow, and we may have to add a little tape to the back, but we're not going to see any of the wires in there. But that's how I scaled those out. And then just to dress up the tree, added some kind of garland and some balls and stars we'll engrave those on there to kind of make it look a little bit better. So then we have this kind of middle spacer piece. This is going to provide the gap that goes between this front and back. That's going to allow for all our wiring. And I left this cutout, which is basically the width of this tab, and that's where our wiring can pass through into the bottom. And then of course, just the outline of the tree. So our base here, I have a few pieces that'll laminate together. I'll stack up. So these are going to be the top pieces. I might be able to get by with just one of these, but it's going to depend on the thickness of the material. So I have this to be roughly just under a 1/4 inch in height. And so with 1/4 inch material, some of it's like 0.2, 0.21 on up to over 1/4 inch. And that's where we're going to have a little bit of variation. So if you need to, you might need to cut out a couple of them, but you would start with at least one of them. And then the bases, you're going to need, I think, about 3/8 of an inch to clear that, the battery bay and such. So probably going to need 2 of these in 1/4 inch just to give us some room, make sure that that's not resting on the battery. But then those all get glued together. The top gets stuck into the base. Now, the only thing that really should need to be adjusted on here for different types of material is going to be this slot here. So this width is going to stay the same, but it's the thickness front to back that's going to matter. So if we're using true 3/4 inch material, then the way this box is set up should work. Bring in our measurements. I have it set at 3/4 of an inch in thickness, but if say they're 0.2, now we need to bring this back to 0.6 for the 3 layers of material. So that's very simple to do. You can just resize those and they are just centered. So if we needed to resize that, all we'd need to do is come up here and we would change our height to 0.6. Hit enter, and now that should bring it in top to bottom. If not, these are just centered. All we'd have to do is select both of them and click our center vertically and center horizontally, and then we'd be good to go. So that's going to be the only thing that on this piece that would need to be adjusted. Everything else just kind of is stacked. And so let's go ahead and get this cut out. I'm going to be trying to do a couple of them, one in 1/4 inch and one in 1/8 inch. So we are going to need to adjust this width on the 1/8 inch for sure. And I'm going to measure whatever material I pull out to get the correct depth for a stack of 3 of them. So let's hop back into the shop and get back on the laser. All right, so for a 1/4 inch material, I have this piece that I have a couple cutouts on and went ahead and ran a test grid there so we could dial in our settings on this. I'm going to be using the Rolly Lasermatic MK2 30 watt for this, and looks like we're going to be able to be running this material around 350, 375 millimeters a minute, and we'll keep that around 90% power. But I do want to check the thickness of this, so I have a set of calipers here, and if you don't have a good set of these, I recommend getting them. This one will do millimeters as well as inch in decimals and inch in fractional, so it's a really nice tool. We're going to go ahead and measure this thickness, and let's see. Yeah, we are coming in at 0.2375 inches, so we're going to want to adjust that slot in Lightburn. Then we'll toss this in the laser and get everything set up.
So again, the only measurement we need to change is the thickness of the material, and we're going to take the measurement times 3, which is 0.73, and resize that. And I decide not to resize the second one, but just rather delete that and make a copy of the first one, just to ensure that both pieces are exactly the same. Then we can move on to placing our items on the material. I'm going to just kind of move these around, trying to maximize the use of this scrap piece. And we are actually able to get them all in there. And as always, don't forget to focus your laser. So I have the job set up to do the engraving first, and that part took about 12 minutes. And then the cut on this 3/4 inch material took about another 5. So about 17 minutes for the entire cut operation on this single piece of plywood. And that worked out pretty well. Once the cutting and engraving was done, did have a little cleanup to do, so grabbed some 220 grit sandpaper and just lightly removed that kind of staining and cleaned that off. We're going to glue this together using some Starbond CA. We got the accelerator just in case we need it. So starting with this spacer piece, getting that aligned, you want to get that so it lines up nicely. Hit it with a little accelerator just to get things locked down. Move on to installing the LED lights, and I had sized these so that I could press them in. I found on the 1/4 inch material I needed to use a little more persuasion, so I'm just using the flat end of the X-Acto blade to get those pressed in. But just working our way down, doing a little bit of cable management as well, making sure all the wires are going to stick inside the frame. And when we get to the bottom, I go ahead and take a little bit of tape just to hold those ends in place so they're not wiggling around too much. With wiring done, we can go ahead and put the back piece on. So just going ahead, adding some CA glue around the edge, and we'll get the back put in place. Again, we want to kind of work quickly, make sure everything's in line, hold it down, and then just hit the edges with a little bit of accelerator to lock it in place. We move on to the base, just laminating up these pieces. These are the two bottom spacer pieces where the battery section is going to sit. And again, just rinse and repeat, adding glue, a little bit of accelerator, get everything locked in place, and then a little cleanup with some sandpaper. With the base assembled, we can do a quick test fit just to ensure that everything is going to sit nicely. If not, we can do some minor sanding. Then we're going to go ahead and add a little CA glue where it's going to sit on the base, as well as the tabs. Then we will push this together and just add a little bit of kicker from the backside to lock it in place while the rest cures. So we're going to go ahead and use a little CA glue and accelerator to lock the battery module in place. Honestly, would recommend probably using some hot glue for this. CA glue will get a little brittle after a while. And then went ahead and wanted to dress it up. So on the next one, we're going to go ahead and try to use some of this wood dye. This is similar to a stain, but you just mix it up with some water. And we're going to go ahead and pre-coat board with some of this green dye. End up doing a few coats to get it a little bit dark, but still wanted to see the wood grain. And then since I'm not going to be able to sand it as easily, going ahead and use some of this transfer tape to try to protect the engraving from getting that staining on top. So drop it back in the laser, run the job through, and we'll check the results when it's done. So once that's done, we can peel off the transfer tape and hopefully have a clean engraving. This worked okay, but there was a little spot where it pulled up and had to sand that down, but I was still able to reapply just a little bit of that dye to kind of mask that in and cover it up. And we can go ahead and get this assembled.
So I've ran a few different copies of this, most of them out of 1/8 inch or 3mm, but there were some variations. And the nice thing is on that base, just the one piece that you have to adjust the depth for as far as the thickness of the 3-ply of your material. And other than that, the file will work for everything as they're just being laminated on top of each other. And so I also went ahead and tried dyeing some of the wood. I did it two different ways. On one of them, you maybe saw that I pre-applied the dye to the wood, and that was okay, but it kind of caused the wood to warp a little bit, and then I had to mask this off. It just felt like extra steps, but it did come out okay. I had a couple coats on there and then used the masking to keep the smoke off there. And then on the base, just went ahead and used those acrylic paint markers and painted that red. On this one, however, I went ahead and cut the parts out and then applied the dye afterwards. And so it's a little bit lighter, but what I was worried about is losing the definition of the decorations of the engraving, and they actually look pretty good. So I would go ahead and just cut the parts out. Using that wood dye seemed to work all right. It was just this trans tint. I'll try to link it down below. You mix it up with some water and it will act as a dye as opposed to a stain. So it kind of just soaks into the fibers. And this one I went ahead and did kind of a brown base. It came out a little bit grayish, but that's just the colors I had with the paint markers. If you had some decent acrylic paints, you could adjust that as well. And with this one, went ahead and cut this out of 1/4 inch material, so it's a little bit thicker than the 3 mil or the 1/8 inch, just to show that it could be done. And the only difference is I find that the LEDs aren't quite as noticeable unless you're direct on. It just kind of, they're sunken in more so that it'll muted from the side. However, definitely could work with this material, and you could play around with these slot sizes maybe to bring them out a little bit closer to the front. But definitely something you can play around with that. The LED lights are cheap. I glued these in with CA glue. One of these is already popped out. I think with this plastic, I'm gonna need to scuff it up a little bit more. Probably better to use like a hot glue gun. So maybe get a few of them set up and then use some hot glue in there. It's gonna have a little more give. The CA glue just gets really brittle and will break free if it doesn't have a good hold on there. Kind of a fun project. Going to be able to use this at work on the desk and hand a few out. So hopefully it maybe has inspired you. If you're interested in playing around with this file, I will have a link down below to my Etsy shop where you can download this and play around with it. I will also have a link down below to the LED lights. These came in just this little package. The listing says 4 to a pack. I actually got 5 to a pack, but either way, they're about $6 for 4 or 5 sets, so a little just over $1 a piece, and then whatever scrap material you have on hand. These are fairly inexpensive to make and have some fun with. So that's where I'm gonna leave this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I wanna thank you for watching. If you made it this far, you're definitely a trooper, and I appreciate it. I will have links down below to as many of the things as I used in this video, from the Rolly Lasermatic laser to some of the supplies, the glues. Using those links helps me out. I get a small kickback in commissions, and that helps me buy supplies and materials and come out with additional project videos for you. So I appreciate you using those links, but it's always no pressure. So if you're new here, I hope you will stick around, maybe consider subscribing. I do a lot of project videos, I do machine reviews, I do software tutorials, everything around lasers, CNC routers, 3D printers, just general workshop stuff, trying to inspire people, help them learn how to use their tools and enjoy being out in their workshops, whether it's for business or hobby. It's just fun to be out in our workshops making things. So once again, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can get out into your workshop and make something too. We'll catch you next time.